as you enter into this law of embracing authenticity and the law of authenticity, it doesn't mean you're just wearing out everybody else around you. It means you're being true to yourself and recognizing the stress in your life as an ally, embracing it.
Yeah,
and
analyze yourself.
Taking that to Jesus so you can actually have the kind of rest that is restoring. But here's the second law. The second law is the law of partnership. So if you're going to have rest and be at rest while you're at work, you got to be partnered with the right thing or the right person in this case. Here's what verse 29 says: "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Jesus uses a term yoke, which is a work tool. So Jesus is saying, you can be partnered with me at work while you're doing something productive for the kingdom of heaven, productive in your life. You can actually be partnered with me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Amazing promise here by Jesus, but the promise is based on the partnership with him.
Yeah, it's proportionate weight, you mentioned when we were talking earlier. The most important thing about partnership is we're talking about production, not performance, and we're talking about proportionate production. So the weight of this organization is not on me. The success of ministry is not on my shoulders. I don't have to put on the persona that everybody wants me to have so that I'm doing the job correctly. I can be authentically who God made me to be because I'm partnering with him. So here's the idea of yoke, right? We're not farmers. We don't plow fields, but in
You're
this
a gardener
concept,
a bit.
No, I plant things and then I pay somebody to weed my garden every
Didn't
once
you
in a
just say to someone, "Don't give me a houseplant because I'll kill it"?
Yeah, no, my house
Yeah,
plants
we're
are
not.
fake.
We're not gifted here.
I love flowers, and I love, as you know, I'm a little insane about it, but I'm not very good at it. Okay, but anyway, so the yoke would have been really understandable to Jesus' audience and probably most audiences up until the last century. They get the idea of the yoke. You put 2 horses in a yoke, you put 2 oxen in a yoke, 2 mules in a yoke, but whoever is in the yoke, and in this context it's probably oxen because Jesus is not speaking, he's speaking to poor farmers and they don't put horses in yokes. The animals in the yoke are equal. They're the same kind of animal, and they are chosen specifically to work together. Their personalities and the way that they work has to be, what's the word I'm looking for?
Synced?
Yeah, they have to be synced together, and so the farmer is very specific about what animals he puts together, and once he puts them together, they're yoked for life. If one animal dies, the other animal becomes useless. He has to do something different. But
this blew my mind.
He can't be yoked with
I didn't
another
actually
animal.
believe this when I read this, so I looked up a bunch of videos and everything, and it's really true. When they pick an ox, oxen are this way. When they pick an ox, if they're not partnered with the right ox, they won't produce the same level at the same level, and the partnership will be useless. It's pretty astounding. Look and do some research on it. It'll blow your mind. But then when they find the right partnership, they stick with it.
Yeah, and
it's incredible.
I mean, we've probably heard the horsepower terms about horses together. The interesting thing about oxen, one ox can pull 5,000 pounds, but 2 can pull 15,000 pounds, 3 times as much. And oxen, as opposed to horses, they can't pull as fast, right? This is why horses pull chariots. They don't pull as fast, but they can pull heavier loads for a longer time, much longer time. They can go forever pulling a heavy load. So that's why the ox cart, the Ark of the Covenant, all of these things are pulled by oxen. Something heavy gets pulled for a long time. And that's ministry. Like, we'd like to think of it that we're in a chariot, like, drive to the finish line. Yeah. Woohoo, we win. Look how beautiful it is. And and nothing beautiful about oxen, but they are in it for the long haul, and they have the ability and the endurance to pull this thing off because they're paired correctly, they're matched, they're strong, and they just keep going.
So think about that in terms of what Jesus is saying. So Jesus said, "Come to me, all you are weary."
Yeah.
You don't know that unless you're willing to be authentic. But then he says, "Take my yoke upon you. Take my yoke on you. Partner with me."
Right.
Because when I'm the other person in your yoke, we're going to pull a whole lot more than you're going to pull. Now, think about this in terms of our workplace. You know, all of our kids, we have 3 boys. We've always celebrated this really fun thing of, go to work with Daddy Day. And
When they were little.
And it was really fun. We've done it with all 3 of them, and I've had different jobs. But in business, I did it with them in business. Our last boy got to come with me to church and ministry, and as that was a vocational job for me. So they go and do this. And you know what? When you did this, maybe you did this with your dad or with your mom. When you went to work, you probably weren't stressed at all. You probably weren't worried about it. You probably thought it was fun.
Oh, they loved it. They carried their little lunchbox.
Oh, they had a
We made a little
blast.
briefcase with their little coloring stuff in it.
It was so much fun.
They were all preschool. When
They
we
looked
did
at
it.
work so differently than I
They
did.
loved it.
I wonder what it would look like for you to go to work with Jesus, where every day was go to work with Dad Day, and you weren't carrying that load. Instead, it was the work, it was Jesus' work, not your work. And you were partnered together with him in such a way. Now that verse makes a lot of sense. Now you can be at rest while you're at work with this work tool illustration that Jesus so powerfully gives his followers and saying, "Take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle and humble at heart." And then you're going to find rest for your souls.
And I think that little phrase there we always skip over because it doesn't seem to make any sense. What does working hard have to do with being gentle and humble?
Yeah.
I've always skipped over that and just gone to, okay, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, right, from Isaiah.
Yeah.
We just skip over that.
Make my burden light.
Skip over that little part, and, I sing it in my head like in the Messiah. You know the song. I do it, but we won't do
Handel's
that now.
Messiah,
Yeah,
yes.
from the Messiah. Anyway, and I think the gentle, humble in heart is probably a pivotal portion of this promise that his yoke will be easy. Because in a yoke, the partners are equal. And I think this interferes with ministry. I know it interferes in the workplace because we all feel like in order to be successful or to do well, there's always a hierarchy involved, right? There's always a little bit of tension. Even in church life, there's the tension of being seen as valuable and how does this compare with and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but what other people are doing. And Jesus models, of course, servanthood to us. In Philippians 2, he talks about, he was humble and took on him the position of a slave. And he's telling us to put a yoke on. And that's not, that's a work tool and I can't get out of it. So it might feel like slavery. But if Jesus hadn't gone there first and shown us exactly what it looks like to be in obedience with the Father, to be to humble yourself, we get to put ourselves in the yoke.
Yeah.
It's an act of obedience and submission and faith, just like Jesus chose to put himself into human flesh and come to the earth. When you humble yourself, that's a completely different work scenario than when I'm in a job and I have to do these things and this is what people expect of me. I'm going to chafe against those restrictions and I'm not going to have, my burden is not going to be light or easy and I'm not going to have rest. I'm going to have chaos that I have all these work parameters around me. I'm allowed to do this. I'm not allowed to do this. And that's not the
Yeah, and
job
I think
that Jesus
it really
envisions.
goes against the grain of how I need to perform at work.
Yeah.
Because if I'm yoked with Jesus, that performance, that humility comes to where it's not about my performance.
It's not about me at all. Yeah.
And suddenly, Paul's words ring true of have this same mind that is in Christ Jesus, who humbled himself and took on humility to become a man and came to this earth and even took on the death of a cross, the execution of the humiliation. Jesus who humbles himself. But then he says the other part of that phrase, which is really cool, that he's this amazing teacher, that he's gentle at heart. He's the perfect person to be partnered with because he's gentle. Everyone's worked for the bad boss, you know.
Yeah, he doesn't get frustrated with us.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that concept, and I'm glad you emphasized it because it's so true that my pride can get in the way of me even getting in the yoke.
Yeah.
And if I don't get in it, I never experience this humble, gentle teacher.
No, I end up striving and performing and carrying the weight of my responsibilities on me and always feeling the humiliation, honestly, of disappointing people. Because it ends up being about me, even though I want it to be about Christ. It ends up being about me.
And when it becomes about you, it inevitably causes us to focus on performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, starts to move into comparison of what others look like. And I know one of our favorite books, Mere Christianity.
Do I get to read the C.S.
You
Lewis
can
quote?
read a C.S. Lewis quote.
There's a C.S. Lewis quote for everything in life, but here's the one about this concept. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only about having more of it than the next man. It is the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. Once the element of competition is gone, pride is gone.
Yeah, so here's the third law. We talked about the law of authenticity, the law of partnership, and here's number 3, the law of cooperation. So what does it look like to actually be partnered with Jesus when he says, if you take my yoke on you, then you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. If we're able to stay in this process with Jesus, he's promising something here that we get to live out and saying, you're going to find rest for your souls. That's different than rest even for your bodies, which rest for your bodies is really important.
Well, rest for your soul is rest for your body, but rest for your body isn't necessarily rest for your soul.
That's confusing. Explain that.
When my soul is at rest, my whole body adjusts, right? Because the chaos in my physical and mental body I'm a spiritual being, so everything comes from my soul. But if my soul is good, then even if my body is, because our bodies fall apart as we get older, we hate it, but it's true. But if my soul is at spirit, I can manage the physical things that happen to me without it ruining who I am and crushing my faith. But if I'm only always fixing the external and I'm never fixing the internal, then I can't ever get to the root of the chaos. I can only perform and pretend like things are good, or always be pursuing the next way to rest.
Or always looking at others to see how I line up.
I need another vacation.
Up.
I need a better vacation. I need a different job. I need a different spouse. I need different friends. I need a different church. Like I'm always looking to upgrade because I haven't addressed the chaos inside of me. I'm only dealing with the externals. So if the externals are bad, then I just change the externals, and that doesn't change what's happening in your spirit.
That's so good. That's so good. I love this story in Scripture of Peter, and Peter's my favorite disciple because he blows it so much.
I love Peter.
Yeah, and he's just like me. I blow it huge, and And when I do, it's not a little thing. And I love how Jesus approached Peter after his largest failure in life. He had denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus predicted it would happen. He did it. He denies him at his most critical moment. And when Jesus really needed him, he stepped back. He stepped away. And then he even denounced him. Well, then Jesus resurrects from the dead. And rather than having a sit-down talk and rebuke of Peter, he actually invites him to a breakfast on the side of the beach and repeats a miracle for him. It's a great story in John chapter 21. Go read it. It's phenomenal. But there are just some really cool things that come out of this. Like the fact that Peter, after his biggest failure, announces to the rest of his buddies, hey, guys, I'm done. I mean, I don't know. He didn't say that.
I don't know what else to do. Obviously, I've blown this, and I'm no longer qualified to be a disciple.
I mean, that's what we think. I mean, the human side of this.
I mean, that's what I would think.
And I think as we put that up, we love the series The Chosen because it shows that human side, and we're always wondering what the disciples were thinking or what they were going through.
Well, and if you're comparing yourself, sorry to interrupt, if you're comparing yourself and you're trying to perform well, he did not perform well.
Yeah.
He did the opposite. He did the worst thing that could have been done during Jesus' worst moment. And so if he compares himself to what I should have done, who I should have been, I'm disqualified.
I'm out.
He's not building the church on me. I couldn't even admit that I knew him. And so there's that going on.
And then he shows up after being resurrected from the dead. You'd think he'd rent out a stadium and show the world that he's alive. And he did appear before like 500 people, witnesses in Scripture, and that's how
it seems all individual. He's meeting with them.
But he does all these individual conversations, and one of them is with Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And those who went fishing with Peter that day. And I love that he say, I'm going fishing. That's it. I'm out. And the rest of them say, we're going to go fishing with you.
Yeah, he goes back to what he knows he's good at because he failed at the new fisherman job.
Yeah. And listen, Peter had a crew. They all went fishing. Jesus shows up on the seashore. And we focus on the miracle that he did of his cast your nets on the other side. And he's like, wow,
the great catch.
It's Jesus. And Peter jumps out of the boat and runs to him. But here's something really cool is that Jesus already had breakfast ready. Don't know where he got the fish. Maybe he did his own fishing. Maybe they just appeared. I don't know. He had fire that he'd cooked the fish on, and it was with coals, John points out, which meant he had been there for a while if you have a coal burning. And
he'd probably been there the whole time they were fishing. Like he had to have lit that and been on the shore while they were out struggling to fish. And so, he's preparing the breakfast.
Right now, Jesus is preparing after your biggest failure.
Yeah, that's good.
He is preparing, just putting this together, this moment, wanting a moment with you, for you to realize this is not on you. I'm still with you. And he says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? Which sounds like, really? Jesus,
you're going to rub it in.
Come on, man. This is my biggest failure, And the word he used, Jesus says, do you agape love me? In the Greek that's that unconditional, all out, all in, giving love.
Which he knew the answer to already.
Peter gives him the answer, right?
Yeah,
he says,
now.
You know all things, Lord. You know that I phileo love you. He used a different Greek word. I love you like a brother. Jesus asks him again, do you love me unconditionally, all in? Jesus, I love you like a brother. And then Jesus meets him where he is, and he says, okay, do you love me like a brother? Do you phileo love me?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Jesus, you know all things. You know I love you like a brother. And then he says, feed my sheep. Now, it doesn't mean a lot to us, but what Jesus is saying is, you're not disqualified, and I don't need you to be qualified. Okay, I need you to be willing. Are you still willing, Peter? And I don't know what you're walking through right now, but that moment in the hospital was a major wake-up call for us.
Yeah, so to piggyback on that, Jesus is wanting to restore Peter to his original state. And his original calling was to be a fisher of men rather than a fisher of fish. And Peter, in his despondency, goes back to fishing for fish. And Jesus says, no, you're still going to be a fisher of men. We just have to do this differently. You have to be yoked with me. This is not on you, because when we put it on ourselves, we're going to fail. Peter failed because he was operating as a normal human being who was terrified. It was a very scary moment. And he was afraid for his life. And so he defaulted to being human. And Jesus is so gentle and humble. He's so gracious. It's like, I know who you are. I know that you can't do this by yourself. That's why I want you to be yoked with me. That's why I'm calling you to work with me. And so post heart attack, I mean, we always felt like we were working with God and for God, but we had to really re-examine, no. What does this look like to not take the pressure onto ourselves? That it's okay if people don't like us. It's okay if people don't understand where this is going. It's okay if we take more time for our family and our health. In fact, all of these things are what God requires of us. This isn't a popularity contest, and we're not running the world here. This is all God's. Our lives belong to Him. Our children, our bodies belong to Him. So why would we be okay with working 60 hours a week? That's not respecting the body that God gave us. Sleeping 5 hours a night is not respecting the body God gave us. When we know medically that our bodies need 8 or 9 hours a night. It's taking on the idea that we can somehow be superhuman when we're not. And so, eating the wrong food, that's disrespecting the bodies that God gave us if we're going to be gluttonous, or if we're going to starve ourselves, or if we're going to eat food that's harmful to us physically. That's not respectful of the bodies God gave us. So all of these things work in tandem together to be a healthy leader. I have to be in the yoke. And what does that yoke mean? Well, it might be different for different people, but I think there's some universal application to this, that I need to live within the framework of the human body that God gave me, which is so huge that Jesus was willing to put himself in a human body with all of its restraints. It's not superhuman. It needs to sleep. It needs to exercise. It needs to be restored. It needs to shut down.
And listen, I've blown this in every category.
Well,
so you've watched me do it. I'm a grinder, and I will just push through anything. I'll run through a wall, and I'll just keep going. This is not what God wanted when He said, "Take my yoke on you." So when I woke up in the hospital, and you had my hand, and we were sitting there, you were in tears and said, "Can we just be done?" Now, in the moment, you meant that as, can we be done removing this burden? And we've just been in a process where God is actually asking us that question.
Give me the burden.
Yeah. God is asking me, He's asked us, and maybe He's asking you, can you be done? Can you be done carrying this burden yourself, living it the way you think you can work it out? And I wonder what it would look like for you to start living out the law of authenticity, the law of partnership, the law of cooperation, and actually taking His yoke and being at rest while you're at work, because you're in God's work. We'd love to help you try to figure this out, try to find out. We don't have all the answers. We're going to have a different guest on every episode and try to glean everything we possibly can from them Hey, we want to connect with you as well. Tell them again how we can get this information in their hands, because there's a lot of cool tools.
Yeah, so subscribe to Stress Test, and you can do that by texting the word stress.
Actually, 1 second. You subscribe on our YouTube channel. You can do that, and on any platform that streams podcasts. But if you want this information she's talking
Resources.
about, then text the word stress to this number.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm so glad to be yoked with
Yeah,
you.
you're so yoked.
Okay, 833-204-2158. It will ask for your contact information, and when we get your email, I will send you the stress test assessment, the Killing Pastors information. I have this is really good at finding the source of your stress. Sometimes we're not sure where it's coming from, so this document will help you identify triggers, root causes, and then scriptures that you can pray, read, and learn. We also have just 5 ways to de-stress every day, an infographic that just has 5 practical applications for de-stressing your life. And we will send all of that to you if we have your email.
So love to connect with you when you text the word stress to 833-204-2158. You get a few prompts, get a few information, then we can connect with you. We'd love for you to go along with us on the journey. So subscribe on the podcast, on any of the podcast platforms or YouTube. We'd love to be able to let you connect with the same truth we're getting every single episode and learning these great lessons from so many great leaders. So join us next time on Stress Test.